So I'll take over sharing in the meantime. And yeah, so let's just get started, and hopefully people can join as we go. So yeah, we generally have a tech talk every week. So today I'll be giving a tech talk on some new features in API Hub. And then we have a chance to have a discussion, Q&A, open forum around anything really around APIs and integrations within Google Cloud. So don't forget, if you have questions, you can drop them in the Q&A section or just raise your hand. So just let us know in the chat or in the Q&A section with any questions you might have, and then we can handle those and just answer them as we go, or at the end we'll have some time for questions as well. So let's get started. My name is Tyler. I'm an architect, engineer in the Apigee team based in Berlin, Germany. I work with customers on their API and integration projects across Europe, also with global customers. And so it's always fun to bring new learnings and new features here to the community, and have a discussion and showcase what some of the cool things that are now possible. Yes, we had the wrong meeting link, unfortunately, in the invitation, but hopefully people can switch over to this one. The topic that I brought today is API discovery and observability with API Hub. There were some new features released in public preview a couple weeks ago that add some really interesting features in this direction, also without having to add any additional agents or monitoring tools to be able to discover APIs and onboard them into API Hub. So we'll be looking at that in just a moment. To start off with, I wanted to bring some quotes from a very distinguished computer scientist, one of the founders of the art of computer science, is Alan Perlis, who said that fools ignore complexity, pragmatists suffer it, some can avoid it, and geniuses remove it. And another similar quote, simplicity does not precede complexity, but follows it. And I found these quotes really relevant and inspiring for this topic of bringing order and making sense of complex API landscapes, right? So out of the complexity, bringing simplicity and structure and reusability and a lot more value from APIs in the distributed landscapes that we have these days across clouds, across different infrastructures and different systems, right? So looking at the overall landscape, API data is everywhere, distributed, a lot of structured APIs, managed APIs, unstructured, unmanaged APIs, right? And this is something that I think we can bring a lot of value to organizations and to companies by helping organize and structure this landscape. Of course, with the world of agents and agentic AI growth, this is only intensifying. Thinking about different new MCP services, new A2A services, proxies, using existing APIs in the background. Of course, this can lead to even more agent sprawl, integration sprawl, and LLM sprawl, right? I think especially with the ease of cloud services, this makes it super easy for people to spin up new services, new integrations, new LLM services as well, right? And so to help, have an onboarding process, have structure and reusability here, that not everyone is reinventing the wheel, that certain standards of security, of authentication, authorization, of management are in place across this diverse landscape, right? Of course, the most effective way to help organize this is to bring value at the same time, right? So to save people time and make it easier for them to benefit and to connect into this ecosystem. So that's exactly what we are looking to help with Apigee and API Hub. As we know, there's a lot of different types of APIs out there. The new kids on the block from the agentic protocols like MCP and A2A and from the LLMs, but also lots of existing APIs across gRPC, REST, GraphQL, lots of tools and infrastructures that are powering those APIs. Of course, the API surface is also a security surface, right? So in every API is a potential vector. Sometimes it's visible, sometimes it's hidden. And of course, the APIs are all built, often with different purposes in mind, right? So that makes it even more difficult to organize. With Apigee API Hub, we are looking to help categorize and organize and bring management to this diverse landscape. So from the complexity, right, helping to bring simplicity. We have a framework to help onboard these APIs into API Hub, into our management, our universe of APIs, using something we call plugins, collect APIs, and curation models, right? So helping to, out of this complexity, bring managed metadata and rules into the overall structures. Usually when we talk about this with customers, with teams who work in the API space, this resonates really a lot, right? Is that everyone's used to all of the complexity, but to have a path and a structure to help bring more order, more management, more visibility, more transparency, more reuse into the API landscape. This is a really powerful way to bring value to the organization, right? It's also helping to reuse what's already there, right? Because there's a lot of value in that complexity. There's a lot of systems and data and APIs that can do a ton of cool stuff, but it's not helping everyone. It's not helping anyone if it's not visible and managed and reliable and just available within the organization, right? And that's what API Hub helps enable. So this covers the areas of discovery, lifecycle and governance, security and compliance for all types of users, right? And of course, now increasingly more and more agentic users and use cases, but of course also traditional clients and applications and integrations as well. So you can kind of say from chaos to catalog, centralizing APIs and metadata. The landscape, of course, of metadata is also vast, from Apigee to other APIs, gateways and structures and locations where this metadata it can be found. That's why we have a plugin framework to help ingest that data, process it, curate it, collect it, and bring it into an ordered system of topologies, of organization, of tags, and hierarchies of data that we can work with in an organized way. Just to give an overview of API Hub, in case you are not familiar with some of the latest updates, we're looking at really providing an ecosystem view of all the APIs. So, categorizing them across business unit, lifecycle, type, target users. This is completely flexible as well, right? So you can define your own topologies to tag and categorize the APIs with. Having a single pane of glass for searching and finding APIs is also super, super useful. I'll show this in a moment in the demo, but finding APIs across different categories, from the versions to specifications down to the operation level. One of the newer features, supply chain graph. So mapping dependencies of the API landscape as well. So seeing where APIs reuse or use other APIs, and these dependencies are also something that can be very complex and intransparent, where we can help bring some transparency and visibility into that landscape. And when we're looking further into the agentic landscape, right? So delivering enterprise context for agentic platforms. This is something we have a toolset connector into the agent development kit. This is something I've been working with a ton in the last few months. It's really, really powerful to bring together lots of different tools into agent workflows or agent functionalities, right? So thinking about MCP services, but also any type of API workflows, integration flows from application integration, databases, there's database connectors. So there's lots of interesting ways of mixing data sources and tool sets together into agentic agents built with Agent Development Kit. I just saw a couple weeks ago, I think it was last week, the A2P platform, so to help with agent payments as well. Was quite interesting. Was just looking at that with some colleagues in a different session this morning, but basically helping have a common protocol to have agent payments be done in a secure way, right? So being able to also do money transactions. I saw that some partners like credit card companies, WorldPay, other payment providers are on board for this. So this should help with also organizing around transaction and payment workflows as well in Agent Development Kit through MCP and A2A communication. Super interesting. What I'm really looking at is getting the MCP and A2A services indexed in API Hub as well as all other APIs, right? So having a complete view end to end with all the existing REST and GraphQL, gRPC, and legacy APIs, but then all of the new stuff as well with the MCP and A2A services, and then to have that complete overview of the entire landscape. This makes it also much easier to find stuff that could be useful to add to agents in ADK, and then adding APIs from API Hub to an ADK agent is super easy, just through a tool set that's provided. The Collect framework also has been recently released and updated to make it easier to connect to different third-party or also first-party systems. So to ingest data from different API gateways, from other compliance tools, dev tools, CI/CD systems. So to have a standardized format to collect all of that data. I just saw that the documentation has been updated here for developing plugins to connect data into the Collect framework. So I know that, of course, from the Apigee side, we support Apigee X, Hybrid, OPDK, and Edge, and of course, looking at how other gateways can also get ecosystem plugins in place to ingest their data as well. When we have the API Hub plugins in place, so for example, from X, Hybrid, Edge, OPDK, then we basically have two options for either pushing data or pulling data into API Hub. The super cool thing about this is that this works, of course, for initial ingestion, but also for updates, right? So if new APIs are added to any of these systems, we'll see them basically instantaneously through push be indexed and added to API Hub, right? If a new version of an API is deployed anywhere, we'll see it immediately ingested and updated in API Hub. There's the full concept of versions, so you always see all the versions, all the deployments, all the specifications of all APIs. The second stage of this is the collect and curation stage. So this is something I haven't worked with as much myself, but some of our colleagues in the team have done a lot with this. I saw Christoph was on the call. I know he's worked a lot in this area of curating the data before indexing it into the API Hub store. So, this is something I think we noticed in the initial versions of API Hub, is that this data, of course, can need some enrichment or can need some curation, it could be better than what we're getting from these systems. So that could be that there's not very good descriptions or not very good documentation or ownership information, or some metadata is missing from these gateway systems. And so we can extend and fill in the gaps basically within the curation framework. So we can basically add plugins and then make sure that all the metadata is filled when new APIs or updates to APIs are added to the catalog. Just means that our metadata is even better and more complete. And so this is something we can automate completely end to end, right? So through the plugins, the data is collected, and then through curation, it's extended and made sure that it's complete before it gets updated into the catalog. The next new feature I want to talk about is the API observation feature, which is now in public preview. And this is even more interesting around taking the shadow API detection that we can run across load balancers, right? So detect APIs that are not yet registered or even visible as APIs, right? So really shadow APIs to detect that through observation jobs. Currently in the public preview, this is just available in GCP, but basically tapping into load balancers, either internal, external, regional, global, and observing API traffic, and then automatically collecting and curating that into API Hub. So this is basically, if we look at the plugins, this is taking structured APIs that are managed already and adding them to Hub. And this is taking unstructured, so APIs that are not yet registered anywhere, right? But having an on-ramp for those APIs to get them registered and curated as well in API Hub. This could also be the first step to a path of management, those APIs, right? It could be that these are just early stage APIs that have found their way into deployment or production, but without using a real gateway or standardized security policies or common management techniques. So this could be a first step to making them visible, indexing them as unmanaged or other gateways, and then having a path to onboard those into a management solution as well. So yeah, I'll be diving a bit deeper into this in the demo. So I think this is really interesting to even bring more visibility into the overall API landscape. Here's how the system works under the hood. So basically, you can connect this to any Google Cloud project. You configure API observation jobs across VPC networks where load balancers are running. These observation jobs just screen the logs or the traces from the load balancers asynchronously, right? So there's no impact to traffic. And this then registers the results, the detected API traffic in API Hub. You have this all centrally visible in kind of the central API Hub project. So you can attach this across from any project, right, to register that data into a central API Hub project. We recommend this for API Hub anyway, to have like a centralized API Hub project where all the data kind of flows together, because that just makes it more valuable that you have an overview across all the different gateways and GCP projects or places where APIs are running. The second stage is to do a discovery and matching check on that registered API data. So a lot of that data perhaps is fully unmanaged APIs. So there's no, these are not registered to API Hub, but maybe some of them are already registered, right? So to make that distinction, which APIs are registered, which aren't, and then looking forward in the future, being able to have actions attached to that, right? So if these are unknown APIs, unregistered, have paths in place to document, sharing, making them visible, observe them, onboarding them, on-ramping them perhaps into a gateway or a management, adding more security, for example. This is what kind of the first version that we have in public preview looks like. Within API Hub, this is in a section called API Observation. Here, we're just going to see all the results of the observation jobs, and we can then work with that data and take action accordingly. In the future, we're looking at also connecting to non-GCP platforms. So in the first version, this is GCP and just in supported regions, because of course in GCP we have standardized load balancers where we can tap into that data. Of course, this is also possible, technically from external load balancers, but that's something to look at for the future, and also depending on user and customer feedback. And this connects all to the overall API Hub vision of having the on-ramps and the off-ramps for different types of API data and metadata, covering discovery and catalog, lifecycle visibility and management, security and compliance, and also dependency management. And of course, being very open to any type of API gateway or metadata system to ingest that data from any cloud, any gateway. We really want to have that the overall view and landscape view of the entire landscape, right? So that means we're not just looking at Apigee APIs, but really any type of API data, unmanaged or managed, right, to have that visibility in API Hub. So with that, let's jump into a demo and look at it in a bit some examples and how this can work in real life. So let me share this tab over here. So here I have a demo project in GCP. We go to the Apigee section. API Hub has now been moved to the top because it's kind of where we're collecting all the information going forward. And of course, proxies and distribution and analytics, these are all features that are dependent upon Apigee gateways. But API Hub is there for all type of API data, right? So it makes sense to showcase that at the very top and have the overview of all APIs as kind of the starting point. If we open up the main console, we now have an overview of all the APIs that have been ingested, that have been registered, collected, curated in the system, flexibly organized by your own tags and topologies, right? So by users, maturity level, team. Super cool is by API type, just to have the overview, right? How many SOAP, how many MCP, how many REST services do we have? And then we can drill down into that data. The same is with semantic search, to be able to search across all the API entities and then get results sorted by overall APIs, by versions of APIs, down to the specification detail as well. And what I think is super cool, down to the operation detail, right? So really, even if a different, product API includes customer information, or if we search for something like customer ID, to get detailed information around anywhere where that can occur, right? And also to deployments. So let's dig into the observation. And you see that's been added here as a new feature here under API Hub. So I'm going to switch to another project where I have some good data that we can observe here. The API observation is based on data from the shadow API detection. So this is kind of the starting point for screening that load balancer data, shadow APIs. Here we can configure the observation jobs for different regions. So I have a job here configured for Europe West 9 in Paris. And then you see once this is configured, this just runs in the background, right? There's nothing additional to manage. This just runs and will start, finding different types of API data that's flowing through this network, right? There's different, of course, server IPs involved. You can see exactly when the data is detected, the last event detected. We can drill down into some of this traffic. So I think this traffic here is from today. And this has some very observable API type data, right? So going to paths like /product service /products. And we also see, what was the response code and header data and metadata with that traffic. So this gives us the overall overview where we can, keep an eye on this. Also, sort it by, what's new, what's coming in, what's being detected, and also have, the potential to manage tags and to, categorize or onboard that data into our system. Once that is configured, we can then start observing that here under API observation. So this taps into that shadow API data and starts doing the comparison with existing APIs in API Hub, right? So you're going to get a lot of data in these observation jobs, but that's actually a good thing, right? Because this isn't yet in our main API catalog. This is really raw data, but it's a great place to start to see, okay, what's flowing out there and where are APIs that, that would benefit from being onboarded into the system, right? So if you see here, a lot of this traffic is we see how many operations were detected. most of it is unknown. So we have 4 operations, 27 operations, everything unknown. We also see where it's flowing through. Is this an external load balancer, an internal load balancer? Where is this data flowing through? Here's a nice one, because here we have 2 operations and 0 unknown, meaning that here it's actually known API data that is being observed, right? And so in this case, it is actually our /products path. And so this API is already registered in API Hub, right? If I click through to the products, then it'll open up the exact API object in API Hub. You'll notice this has also been reworked, the UI, so that we have an overview section for the overall API with our deployments and our versions, linting, and so on. And then we have a tab where we can drill down to specific versions, right? And that observation job linked us directly to the right version. I think it was version 1. And then we can also see exactly the specification file that was matched, right? And so that's basically what's being used to identify traffic, right? Is this in a specification of an operation that's registered in Hub? And then that means that is existing registered API. And this is really cool, because we can really have an overview between known APIs and detected APIs that, for example, here we have 4 operations, 4 unknown across this IP or this load balancer, /pricing, /stocks, /products. Those are all unknown operations, right? This is not matched in any existing API registered in API Hub. The next step here will be to have automatic onboarding or registration features directly here. So after identifying unknown APIs, to be able to take actions automatically using functions. Here in this version, we would have to do that manually, right? To say, okay, let's dig a bit deeper. Where are these requests coming from? Who is servicing this traffic? Is this something we should get registered, or have a process to register, to onboard, to on-ramp into API Hub? But in the future, we'll be helping facilitate that with options to automatically onboard this and fill in the gaps of data and make and try to get these operations and this type of traffic into the system, right? So let me stop there. If there are any questions or comments on these features. Any questions?
Oh, I was just gonna say nothing in the chat, Tyler, but anyone feel free to raise your hand and open your mic.
Sure, I think, so Joanna has a question. Is it aware of Apigee base paths? At the moment, this goes completely based on the specification. So all the operations that are in this spec. So of course, if Apigee is behind the specification and servicing base paths, that's fully transparent, right? It's all just documented in the API spec, and that's where we're getting the operation information from, right? So in that sense, yes, it's aware of base paths in the sense that they're documented. That's the path in our API specification, right?
Let me just open the mic for a bit. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
Just to follow up on your answer. I'm asking this because when using the spec to validate the payload,
Yes.
Apigee, right?
Right.
We have to omit the base paths on the spec that we use for the OpenAPI spec validation policy. So for in our case, all the specs that we have
I know what you mean.
on Apigee, they omit the base path so that the policy can work. So then when API automatically imports, right? We are doing it now via CI/CD, but when we tested it with the automatic import, it would import the spec on the proxy, and that spec would not be exactly the same.
Yeah, so what I've been doing is in my CI/CD pipelines, I basically having multiple versions of the spec that I fill in during CI/CD. So I will have so I have a version that I use to generate a proxy, for example, right? And that includes kind of the base, and that has actually my server, my target URL in it, right? So that's kind of the first API spec. And that's then added to the proxy to validate the traffic. Yes, API Hub now automatically takes that as well as the spec in the API Hub registered version. What I am doing at the moment is I am replacing that in my CI/CD pipeline with a version that is adapted to be on top of Apigee, right? So that's kind of the raw spec, right? That's what the starting point. Then I update the spec with my Apigee server with base path, right? That this spec is then this thing that will be published to the developer portal that the end user will see. So I basically have two versions of the spec, the raw spec for validation and backend target, and then my Apigee updated spec, right? The Apigee updated spec is then I register this, add this to API Hub additionally, like in a further CI/CD step, because that's also what in the future I use for the API documentation in the portal as well, right? So I basically have those two levels of specs, the kind of the raw spec for validation and creating my proxy, if I create it based on API spec, and then my Apigee spec that includes base path and so on. So the nice thing about API Hub is that you can always update the specs and update all the assets really easily, right? Either using Apigee CLI or the APIs, of course. So that's basically what I'm doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. Makes sense. Yeah, and the server that is on the spec is also the one that is used by the observability.
It is. Yeah,
okay.
The server and all the paths, of course, to the operations, right? So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? I think one of the...
I have one question, Tyler.
Yeah, sure.
Is this API observability available in the all Apigee subscription models or only specific subscription?
It is part of advanced API security. So you will need to enable advanced API security to use this feature. The reason for that is that that's what enables our screening of the traffic. So we don't normally, so this is all part of this kind of data pipeline, right, for screening and analyzing traffic that we use for advanced API security, but also for shadow API detection, and then now for API observation as well. So that's the one thing you need is either Apigee pay-as-you-go or a subscription, and then with advanced API security enabled so that we have this data pipeline in place. Right?
Does it impact the overall performance?
So I would say my experience is no, because this is kind of an async pipeline that's running in the background, right? So it's not impacting, this is at least my experience. We can check with engineering on that to get a confirmation if that's actually, if there is a minimal impact or not, but at least in my experience, there's not an impact since this is basically based on the load balancer logs that are asynchronously screened. Right? Another unique aspect of this setup using API Hub and Advanced API Security for this screening and for the API discovery and observation is that it doesn't need an agent to be deployed anywhere. I was talking to some customers a few weeks ago who were evaluating some alternative solutions for this, right? Because this is a really useful feature and a really valuable feature to have and to introduce into the organization, right? Because there's a lot of shadow APIs and a lot of unmanaged APIs being used out there that really are, a security and not being, utilized as or reused as much as they could, and also a security risk. And so the alternative solutions they were looking at would require deploying agents basically to screen the traffic in real time. And the advantage here is that this is agentless, right? So it's really interacting directly at the load balancer level. And this means that at the moment it's GCP only because we're connected into GCP load balancers, but A lot of load balancers these days are Envoy based, the Envoy open source project that Google develops a lot or contributes to and uses throughout the Google Cloud stack for load balancers, as well as in Apigee. So this kind of basis to have an agentless approach to this type of feature, I think, is something that can appeal to customers, of course, at the moment, who are focused on GCP, but in the future, when we expand this to external load balancers as well, then this is an advantage, I think, that can be positioned, is that you don't need to install an agent, or you don't need to proxy the traffic through an additional layer to have these types of features. But of course, this is a first version, and we're getting this is kind of starting the journey here into API detection and shadow API onboarding and observation. But I think the potential is really there, a really large potential to help customers, right, bring organization and some management and also transparency to the API landscape. There's a comment in the chat that this is only available in comprehensive plan. Yeah, comprehensive, I think that would be pay as you go. That's intermediate, and then comprehensive is the highest level. I'm not 100% up to date on, but that could be, yeah, that you would need a comprehensive environment for, I don't know, does anyone know if that's a requirement for advanced API security as well, or if that's actually?
Yeah, we are an intermediate, but I don't find this option is not available to enable. I was thinking only comprehensive left.
Okay, well, we can check on that to verify that, if that's a hard requirement moving forward, or if there's ways of doing that with intermediate as well. But I'm not 100% sure. We'll have to check on that. Yeah. Another question in the chat is there a roadmap that can be shared regarding this feature, API observation? If not, we're going to expect further news. Yes, so there is a roadmap. If you reach out, if you're in contact with anyone in the Apigee team, we're happy to do roadmap discussions or have a roadmap session together. We cannot share it in a public session like this one. But if you just reach out, yes. And this is an area that a lot of focus and roadmap planning is going on and in progress to get updates here, because yeah, the potential is really large, and there's a lot of this, I think, really helps expand the API conversation at customers, and especially looking at the agentic evolution and how much this impacts APIs and also the number of APIs. I think this will be really valuable moving forward. Yeah, so there's another question in the chat. I have a question regarding plugin integration. Let's say I want to use a plugin to connect to AWS. Would it be sufficient to configure a Cloud Run service that connects to AWS and simply returns a JSON response? Yeah, so Christoph answered in the chat. Yeah, so yeah, Christoph, do you want to go into more detail?
Yeah, maybe it will be easier like this. Yeah, the protobuf, it's required only if you want API hub to pull, to call, sorry, your Cloud Run. That means you want to implement a pull plugin. In this case, you will create a plugin, and this plugin have to be able to call, sorry, your Cloud Run with this protobuf format, and then your Cloud Run can call AWS to collect the data. If you want to do the opposite, that means maybe you will have your Cloud Run that will be, or maybe something that can call your Cloud Run when something happens on AWS. When you deploy something new on AWS, your Cloud Run will be called. In this case, Cloud Run have to call API Hub. It's the opposite, and you will have only to push an API data JSON format.
I think actually the push option would you say that would be better, Christoph? Because then you were getting more real-time updates.
Yeah,
right?
and that, and we rewrite internally, we rewrite our Apigee X and Apigee hybrid plugin. It was
Yeah.
in the full mode before, so we can schedule it to run every 6 hours, for example. And now we rewrite this plugin to be in full mode. That means every time you deploy a new proxy in Apigee X, the plugin is called, and you get immediately the information into API Hub. It's more reactive. It's more it's faster.
This is noticeable, right? Because now you see the updates immediately, right? If I deploy a new proxy, it's immediately updated in API Hub, right? Yeah.
And for example, in CI/CD scenario, every time at the end of your pipeline, you can see immediately the API appear in API Hub. You don't have to wait for hours.
Right. Exactly.
To appear. It's immediately there.
Yes, very cool. Any other questions on these topics?
Sorry, I joined late, Tyler. I just want to know, like, when it comes to observability, you are talking, maybe I need more context. So does it have any impact if we are using like a third-party tool like Dynatrace, Datadog, or Splunk? That's not related to this, or is just related to the API?
No, this is completely transparent on at the load balancer level, right? So basically, when you enable observation, this transparently screens the load balancer logs for API traffic and then does the matching in the background in our observation jobs, right? So you can still have Dynatrace or whatever other tracing solutions you're using running. The thing we see though is that often there's a lot of unmanaged traffic out there that doesn't have tracing enabled, or there's no agents running. So this will pick up all of that traffic as well. So this will pick up anything that's flowing across the load balancers, which is that's a super cool thing to have, right? Is to have a way of detecting any type of API, without having to have an agent or Dynatrace or some other solution in place, right? Nothing against those solutions. That's also good to have that in place, and you can see a lot with that. But this is basically catches a lot of other things as well, right? Other APIs that are not being traced currently.
So the slides will be available, Taylor, or how?
Yes, so we'll share the recording and the slides. Yes, and this is all visible in the RSVP link after the session.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So here's just a summary of the recent updates in the last few months for API Hub and Advanced API Security. So some of the more recent ones, the navigation updates that I showed, so kind of improving the UI layout, making it easier to find versions and navigate everything. Now you can also enable and disable semantic search on the fly. So previously you had to redeploy API Hub to make a change with semantic search. Now you can do that just through configuration and the settings. We then have the automatic Open API spec discovery from Apigee proxies. Again, this is something that I then update in my pipeline because I, of course, for my portal and other uses, also for this detection, I need to have the API Apigee base path and server in the specs, right? But it's nice to have something already added out of the box as a start, and that's kind of a nice feature that it's already, you have the base configuration already there. Now you can also manage the plugins in the UI. So if you go to the settings, you can add plugins to Apigee X or Hybrid, or add your custom plugins very easily just in the UI. The Shadow API discovery that we looked at, Edge OPDK support in plugins, and then a big request was always VPC service control support. So this is now GA since July. So if you're using VPC service controls, which is a quite common network control in GCP, then this now works with API Hub as well. You can always find all of the Apigee API Hub releases and updates at the release notes site for API Hub, as well, of course, as for Apigee and application integration and connectors as well. The links to some of the documentation of the features we showed today are also here in the slides, so we'll share these in the resources after the session. Any further questions before we wrap up for today? Yeah, Kunta, go ahead.
Hi, Taylor.
Yeah, hi. Do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, whenever I just go through the Shadow API, I mean, your screen, it is showing like you have already run the job, right? I mean, for running the job, what we need to the configurations?
Yes, so you need to first enable or create the job, right? And this runs in the background. So it's been running in my project for the past few weeks. So it's been collecting a lot of traffic, right? I have a lot of observations in place. But this is something you need to first enable advanced API security and then start the collection jobs that run in the background. Yeah.
I mean, in the job, we need to write any script or we need to directly trigger.
No, there's no script needed, right? So it's just you create the jobs and you connect it to the Google Cloud projects that you want to monitor, to observe, right? And then it runs in the background. There's no additional scripting needed, right?
And one more thing, like I see whenever the job run, I mean, how many data is there? Like it is for 1 week or 14 days. How many days the data will be shown in the Shadow API observation?
That is a good question. I don't know. So as far as I can see, I haven't had any. I mean, all the data for me is visible. I've had it run the last few weeks. If anyone knows from the team or here in the chat, if that data expires or gets overwritten, I could imagine it's several months for sure to have a comprehensive view of the data going back. But I don't know what the current data retention there is, or if there is one at all. I don't. It may be that it just. It could also be linked to the analytics data retention of the Apigee environment, even though no, that's probably not the case since this is. I don't know. We'll have to check on that. If anyone in the team knows more about that, then feel free to add it to the chat. But good question. We'll have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler.
Mm-hmm. Great. Then if there are no further questions, yeah. Please share your feedback. So you can give us feedback here directly in the Meet. If you just use the feedback function to vote in the poll. Your suggestions and ratings are very helpful for planning future sessions to gauge the interest and different topics and different directions. So yeah, we're always really happy to get your feedback, and feel free to reach out to us anytime with suggestions or questions or ideas for future sessions. We're always happy to get that. Yeah, Alex, do you want to say something about our community sites?
Yes, thank you, Tyler. And apologies to all of us who joined later to the session. Apparently when I sent you the calendar placeholder, I had an issue when creating the meeting link and it replaced me with a different one. So thank you to all of those who rejoined back. I know it's a contingency that we had no plan, but I really appreciate you still joining us for this session. And to take things further, like Tyler said, if you have any follow-up questions or would like to get some conversations going on with us, you have the community spaces where you can engage with us. You have the Apigee space and the Integration Services Forum, well, in this case, community, in which you can find a knowledge hub, not just for a forum, but also a space for you to catch up on upcoming events, latest articles on how-to videos, and updates from the team. So you can scan the QR codes, or I just copy and pasted the link for you for easy access. I see you raised your hand, and I'm not sure if that was from the previous question or you have any other comment.
No, it is addressed by the Tyler. Thank you.
All right, thanks to you. Well, thank you, Tyler. This was a abnormal session, but we do really appreciate you all joining us. I'll make sure we share the recording through the community, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks for the upcoming session with Bulkit on application integration. Thank you so much, Tyler, for this great presentation, and have a nice day, everyone.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Talk to you soon.